Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 322 of the podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking about Pittsburgh Pirates phenom starting pitcher Paul Skenes. At the beginning of the Major League Baseball season, one of the biggest storylines was when are the Pittsburgh Pirates going to call up top pitching prospect Paul Skenes? And since being called up on May 11th, the 22-year-old has been how you say lights out, going 6-1 with a 1.93 earned run average to go along with 97 strikeouts, which is the second most in baseball during that time period. Skenes has been so good that recently he became only the fifth rookie pitcher ever to start the All-Star game, the others being Dave Stenhouse in 1962 with the Washington Senators, Mark the Bird Fidrich in 1976 with the Detroit Tigers, Fernando Valenzuela in 1981, and Hideo Nomo in 1995, both with the LA Dodgers. Skenes' 11 Major League starts is the fewest ever before starting the All-Star game, and I'm sure there are some who believed a more established pitcher should have started the game, but baseball made the right choice. They need Paul Skenes to be one of the faces of the sport moving forward. Why I say that is because if you look at the history of the sport, elite starting pitchers become mythical figures. Example of this includes Sandy Koufax, who we still talk about even though he hasn't thrown a pitch in more than 50 years. Bob Gibson, whose 1968 season changed the sport. Pedro Martinez, Randy Johnson, Greg Maddux, Roger Clemens, guys who all won multiple Cy Young Awards and guys who are the faces of modern pitching. And right now, I do believe the sport is lacking in that department. There are very few superstar starting pitchers. Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer are at the twilights of their careers. What I'm talking about is this guy takes the mound, it feels like an event. There are very few of those pitchers. You could debate if Garrett Cole is one of those pitchers. And let's say for this conversation he is. Well, he's a guy who is in his 30s. Paul Skenes feels like the future. I think it's been a really long time since we said the best player in baseball is a starting pitcher. Now, Justin Verlander won an MVP, and so did Clayton Kershaw. I mean, those guys were up there for a time period, but it's been a while. I mean, Shohei Ohtani is thought of as a freak because he hits and he pitches. I'm just talking about a starting pitcher who we look at, he takes the mound and we go, this is the best player in all of baseball. It's been a long time. And I think the sport is due for one of those figures that completely takes the sport over. The real question regarding Paul Skenes is, can he maintain this level of pitching for a long period of time? Because the sport has seen young pitchers dominate for a short period of time. Dwight Gooden and Steven Strasburg, who were excellent, but both are not viewed as all-time greats because they lack consistency and longevity. And this isn't just about Paul Skenes, but you would have to be blind to not have serious doubts about a modern starting pitcher having a long run of making 25 plus starts a season to go along with over 200 strikeouts. No one is questioning this man's talent. It's just the recent history of the sport has you wondering about his long-term future. The sport of baseball, I feel like, needs Paul Skenes to hit big, or my fear is that the starting pitcher position will become like the closer position, where absolutely no one cares about it anymore. It was a spot that once had big names like Trevor Hoffman, Mariano Rivera. We used to respect the position, and now we don't. It's all about relievers. Nobody is talking about the closing position anymore. Yes, there are a few somewhat big names left like Josh Hader, but still, even he isn't talked about the way that we used to talk about Mariano Rivera. And it's because the sport really diminished what that position was. The lore of what a closer is completely dead, and my fear is that the exact same thing might happen to the starting pitcher, right? Because when you watch baseball nowadays, they almost treat every pitcher like they're the same thing. Like a starting pitcher is the same as a middle reliever, is the same as a setup guy, is the same as a closer. And that's fine. Maybe that's going to help you win baseball games. It sure has for teams teams like the Rays, who don't really have a lead starting pitcher. They just have a bunch of guys take the mound and they win a lot of games. That's great, but that doesn't get fans excited. Do you know what gets fans excited? Guys who go 7 to 8 innings deep and strike out 10 plus batters a game. That's still the type of thing that gets people excited, and Paul Skenes is the type of player that can do that. Now, can he do that consistently for a long period of time? We're going to see. But that's what fans want to see. Somebody who takes the mound and it feels like a big moment, like it feels special. I know there are so many guys in the majors today that throw 100 miles per hour, but there aren't that many that are going 6 or 7 deep into the ball game. That's a rarity, and hopefully that's something that Paul Skenes can provide in the long term. This guy needs to be big for the sport. I think the sport needs this guy to become one of the main faces of it. And I think that's one of the main reasons they picked him to pitch in the All-Star game, because they need this guy to become a big name, and it felt like baseball is finally becoming self-aware, because let's be honest, baseball has done some of the damage to itself. Like I said, none of the pitchers in the game feel like stars anymore. Yes, you still have Clayton Kershaw, although he's taken, half a year off right now because of his injury. What's also so great about Paul Skenes is he's making you care about a player who plays for the Pittsburgh Pirates, a franchise who has been really bad the last few seasons. You care about the player, not about the team itself, and that's what a star starting pitcher can do. He can make you care about an organization that otherwise you wouldn't. The same thing happened with Stephen Strasburg. I mean, nobody was paying attention to the Washington Nationals, and then all of a sudden we started to, because they got Strasburg, they got Bryce Harper, they had a lot of young talent to watch all of a sudden. But Strasburg was really the beginning of me caring about the Washington Nationals. I wanted to see this young phenom take the mound, and the exact same thing is happening with Paul Skenes. And one of the biggest reasons why baseball needs Paul Skenes to become as big as he can is because if a guy like this comes up and has a short run of dominance and then all of a sudden has Tommy John and has injuries, fans are going to lose their excitement over the next one. I mean, we're not going to fall for the same trick. At some point, the young pitcher is going to have to flourish again. At some point, a starting pitcher is going to have to become the face of baseball, or people are not going to care about starting pitching. I feel like we're almost to that point anyway. I don't know that many people who care about a lot of starting pitchers anymore. And a lot of that has to do with the predictability of that position. You watch a baseball game and you know that the guy on the mound is either going to go 5 to 6 innings and throw 100 pitches. Well, if he's nothing special and that's all he's going to do, what's the point of me watching? Well, that's where somebody like Paul Skenes comes into play, because if he can strike out 10 batters a game and go 7 deep, then we're going to care about the position. He will become a rarity. That's what the sport needs, is a starting pitcher who is going to do something you don't see a lot of the time. Because again, every starting pitcher almost feels like the exact same guy taking the mound, and that's the fault of the sport. The hope is that a guy like Paul Skenes becomes feared by the batters in the sport. Remember when Randy Johnson was feared by every batter in the sport of Major League Baseball? That grew the myth of Randy Johnson. That's why he became one of the major faces of the sport. The same with Pedro Martinez. These guys were feared. How many modern starting pitchers right now do you think are feared by batters throughout the sport? You don't hear about them anymore because I feel like there aren't that many of them. My point is that starting pitchers used to matter a lot more. Now there are teams without real aces. 5-man rotations feel like a joke. Some teams don't even have 3 real starting pitchers anymore. Some of the guys winning Cy Youngs feel underwhelming. I'm mainly talking about Blake Snell. I mean, one season he's winning a Cy Young, and the next season he becomes irrelevant. That's not good for the sport. And then the guys that are blockbuster pitchers, like Jacob deGrom, get hurt all of the time. People like to say that no one will ever reach 300 wins ever again. again, that's a massive understatement. It's tough to imagine any young pitcher getting to 200 wins. There are only 3 active pitchers with over 200 wins: Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, and Clayton Kershaw. And those are pitchers to me who were grandfathered into this new reality of starting pitching. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is something that has really bothered me the last few years when it comes to young starting pitchers. At some point this season, Paul Skenes is going to be shut down because the Pittsburgh Pirates have come up with some innings limit for the young pitcher, and that makes sense to me. I understand why teams are so overprotective of young pitchers, but do any of these inning limits really help out the pitcher further down in their careers? Steven Strasburg still dealt with injuries, even though he had multiple seasons where he had innings limit. You can be overprotective. It doesn't mean that somewhere down the line your young pitcher is going to get injured. That philosophy, I feel like, has really hurt the sport. If the guy can take the mound and throw the baseball, then at some point in a 5-day period, he should do just that until the end of the season. I get it. The Pittsburgh Pirates don't want to rob themselves of their future with Paul Skenes, but what if they are robbing themselves of the now? What if there really is only the now? What if there is no possibility of Paul Skenes being great for the next 10 to 12 seasons? What if this is the new reality for a guy throwing 100 miles per hour? You gotta give it to modern analytics. They really have come up with ways for a team without stars to win a lot of baseball games. I keep bringing up the Tampa Bay Rays because they win a lot of games, yet you don't know a lot of faces on the team. And that's great. They're winning games. But what's hurting the sport is the lack of star power on these teams. And Paul Skenes has legitimate star power that the sport needs to take advantage of. And they need to stop worrying about this 5 years down the line thing. They need to take advantage of the now. And I feel like them having him start the All-Star game was the beginning of that. They don't just need to change the narrative of young pitchers getting hurt early in their careers. They also just need to change the narrative of how overprotective of them they are, because them being overprotective really isn't working out for anyone. The fans feel robbed because they're not seeing these young pitchers take the mound, and then the star pitchers get hurt anyway. So who is it really helping? I hope I never turn on MLB Network later this season and see the words, Paul Skenes has been shut down because he's reached his innings limit. I really hope that's not going to happen. It probably is, and I'll live with it, and I hope it does work out for Paul Skenes down the line. But why should I believe it will? Who has it worked out for? Name the young starting pitcher who got shut down later in the season and then had a great fruitful career. It hasn't happened recently. It didn't help out the likes of Jabba Chamberlain. It didn't help out the likes of Steven Strasburg. So call me crazy, maybe it's not going to work out for Paul Skenes. And who's the last Pirate that got this much attention on a national level? It wasn't Andrew McCutchen, and that guy won an MVP. It was probably Barry Bonds. That's how long it's been. The Pittsburgh Pirates aren't a franchise known for their star power recently, and they finally have one. And what makes him different than the rest is he is a starting pitcher. There are very few teams that have an elite level starting pitcher who has actual star power. Again, the names that I bring up are names that are at the end of their careers. Verlander, Scherzer. I really do believe that baseball fans get annoyed over this overprotection of starting pitchers. Like just recently, Skenes went 7 innings deep against the Milwaukee Brewers, and at that point he hadn't allowed a hit, and instead of trying to go for the no-hitter, the team took Paul Skenes out of the game. That is something that drives baseball fans mad. And the last things fans want to hear is the logic or the reason as to why you took Paul Skenes out of that game. They don't care that Johan Santana threw a no-hitter and then his career was ruined. They don't care about your pitch limit for Paul Skenes. They want to see a young pitcher become a great starting pitcher. And one of the ways you do that is by throwing throwing a no-hitter in your first season with the team. Like, doing these kind of things just takes the fun out of the game, and it's why people don't care about starting pitching anymore. It's like the only guys who are allowed to throw no-hitters are established pitchers like Dylan Cease with the San Diego Padres, who just threw a no-hitter. Those are the only guys who can throw no-hitters. I mean, Nolan Ryan was throwing no-hitters at every stage of his career. Young pitchers used to be able to go for no-hitters. Clay Buchholz threw a no-hitter for the Boston Red Sox during the second start of his career, and he went on to have a fine career. He's not an all-time great pitcher, but you get the point. Him throwing that no-hitter had no ill effect on his career. He was still able to become the pitcher he was going to become anyway. Paul Skenes was not going to be ruined because you went for baseball history. And again, that would help no-hitters. Nobody cares about no-hitters anymore because the best don't go for them. Young pitchers don't go for no-hitters. Everyone wants to see Paul Skenes throw a no-hitter. Why rob us of that? At least if he's not going to get a no-hitter, make it because he gave up a hit, right? And you see something like that and you wonder, are we just going to do the same thing we've done with Paul Skenes that we do with every other young pitcher? Are we going to have inning limits? Are we going to shut him down? Is he just going to suffer injuries anyway? I mean, those are the type of thoughts that baseball fans have now towards young starting pitchers. It's why we don't get all that excited about starting pitchers all of the time. But the reason that people are excited about Paul Skenes is because he's producing on the field. He's showing that he has real potential to be the future ace of the Pittsburgh Pirates and the future ace of the sport. If you can't tell by everything I'm saying on this podcast, I believe the starting pitcher position is one that needs to be saved. I think it is at a low point at this current time period. I think not a lot of people care about who is starting a baseball game because they just go, oh, this guy's going to go 5 innings, throw 95 pitches, and then he'll be on his merry way. I think that's how people view this position. There are not that many big name, big game starting pitchers. And people really haven't been this excited about a young starting pitcher since Stephen Strasburg. Now, Stephen Strasburg, yes, is a bit of a tragic tale because he did deal with all of the injuries, but for one season, he was a hero to the Washington Nationals, helping them win the World Series. I mean, he was dynamic during that postseason run. I really hope we get to see Paul Skenes at the highest level make the postseason with the Pittsburgh Pirates at some point, because that's another way that a pitcher becomes a big name, as he makes a name for himself in the postseason. And it feels like in the last few years we have had pitchers become big game pitchers like Madison Bumgarner, or guys great in the regular season like Clayton Kershaw. It's been a while since we had a starting pitcher who is elite during the regular season and during the postseason. The sport just needs to be more fun, and one of the things that makes the sport fun is elite starting pitchers being faces of the sport. Like, the starting pitcher used to really matter. We used to know almost every team's ace pitcher. You can't tell me the ace of some of these teams in Major League Baseball because some of them don't have real aces. Yes, you have Corbin Burns. He's a really good pitcher, but he's not a massive name, even though he's won a Cy Young. Zach Wheeler is pitching like an elite pitcher, but he isn't always treated like he is one, like he's not a big name. Paul Skenes has the potential to be a big name pitcher who is actually the best pitcher in the game, and that hasn't been the case for baseball in recent years. I'm rooting for him because I want his position to matter again. I mean, I'm a Red Sox fan. It's been a really long time since we had a great star starting pitcher. I mean, it's been since all the way since Josh Beckett, John Lester. I mean, it's been that long since my team had what I felt was a real ace. Yes, Chris Sale was in there for a little bit. You can count him as well, although his run with the Red Sox wasn't super long. But yes, he was an elite star starting pitcher. But since Chris Sale kept getting hurt, the Red Sox haven't had a real ace. A real guy who takes the mound and everybody wants to watch him pitch. And sadly, I feel like most of the sport has been lacking in that department. And right now, the Pittsburgh Pirates have that it guy. And that guy is Paul Skenes. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So please rate, review, and subscribe.